Do you want to learn about SideEffect in Jetpack Compose? In this video, I'm going to explain all three: LaunchEffect, DisposableEffect, and SideEffect, and the use case, where to use them with some examples, and later I'm going to take a look at the underneath implementation of each, then we have a good understanding about these API in Jetpack Compose. So stay tuned. Jetpack Compose is one of the sweetest technology I ever used. From the start, it was very easy to learn. I was able to implement quite complex UI, but at some point when you want to implement a little bit more complex application, you need to make use of other APIs like side effects. For example, in some scenarios, you see Jetpack Compose data flow is unidirectional and every change could cause a recomposition, and you want to do something different based on a condition. In that point, you need to make use of these side effects, and side effects are helpful when you want to make a change in an external state, or you want to call a coroutine a suspend function, or you want to do an event tracking. For these cases, side effects are quite helpful. The first side effects I want to explain is LaunchEffect, which I think it's more useful. So let's get into the Android Studio and see how is the implementation and in what use cases we are going to use, and seeing the underlying implementation of LaunchEffect. LaunchEffect is a composable function except two parameters. The first one is keys and the second one is a coding block. The coding block is a coroutine scope, and within these coding block you can obviously execute any coroutine code like suspend function or anything. And the first parameter is keys. It accepts one or more than one keys you can pass, and that's the important part. The keys you're passing to the LaunchEffect will cause the execution of these coroutine scope coding block. For example, if you pass a unit type to the key, the coroutine scope will be executed only once. Or if you want to pass parameter from your UI state, the block will be executed only if that parameter gets changed during the recompositions. That's the way LaunchEffect works. Let's take a look at detailed implementation of the LaunchEffect. As I said, you see this implementation of LaunchEffect has two parameters, keys and block, but there are other implementation to overload LaunchEffect implementation. In this case, we have three parameter as a keys and one the block. Here is two keys and one coroutine scope block, and this is the first one which accepts only one keys, and the last one, which is this one, it accepts a var arg, which is something like array, any amount of keys you can pass to the LaunchEffect, and the coding block will be executed based on the change of any of those keys. So you see the implementation is not so complex at the first glance, and it uses remember function. Let me use the first one, which is a bit simpler. It used the remember compose function to remember the key, and based on this implementation, as we already know, the remember implementation, it stores the data based on the key, and if the key change, it recalculates this coding block to create a new instance. So within this LaunchEffect implementation, it's just a class implemented remember observer, and it has three functions. As we see here, there's a coroutine job. It launched when the onRemember called, when the first time the compose recomposition is happening, and if any key get changed, this function will be called again, and that's why we are having a job cancellation here, because the key change and the old coroutine scope get cancelled, and we are executing new coroutine within this onRemember. These two others are not so important. These are for those cases the compose function is not available in the compose tree anymore, and for such cases it cancel the job and forget the LaunchEffect because we don't need it any longer. That's the implementation of the LaunchEffect. So let's get into example and see what are the use cases we can have in our code base. For the LaunchEffect, I want to show you two different examples. The first one is about collecting events from viewModel class into our composable function by helping SharedFlow. So in this case, I created a composable function and I added a LaunchEffect coding block. As a key, I passed only the unit because I want to collect the events only once, no more. And within this coding block, I'm going to collect the events. I create a viewModel class and adding a mutable SharedFlow and creating seal class for the event to show toast or showing snack bar. And when the viewModel is done, I come back to the collectFlow component and the LaunchEffect, and I will collect the viewModel.event. Then I add a when condition to show the snack bar and the toast. In the second example, I want to trigger the API call to fetch some data. For that, I can make use of LaunchEffect and pass the unit as a key because I want to call the API only once, and the function will be a suspend function. In this case, LaunchEffect will help us because it is inside a coroutine scope. And you see in this example, I'm creating a composable function and create the LaunchEffect and passing the unit and making a function call from viewModel class which called fetch user data, and within that I just add a random delay, but you can have a real API call to that. And in this case, the fetch user data will be called only once because we passed the unit as a key. The second one is called DisposableEffect. It's not very similar to the LaunchEffect, but it has a key as an input parameter and another scoped object as an input you need to pass, and that scope object include function called dispose. That's the purpose of DisposableEffect. We are going to have a callback to know when this compose component going to be disposed, and DisposableEffect help us in this case if you want to clear some data or unregister some, I don't know, broadcast receiver or something. For those cases, DisposableEffect will help us. There is no coroutine scope, obviously, but similar to LaunchEffect, we can pass different keys to this DisposableEffect function to execute the effect coding block. I'll show you the example in a minute, but you can have your coding block and it can be executed, as I said, based on the key changes. And there's another code block which is the undispose function. It will be called for any clearing data or unregistering broadcast or resources. Looking at the implementation, similar to LaunchEffect, it accepts key and remember the key and creating an instance of DisposableEffect implementation. Within this class, you see there is a DisposableEffect result object. It will be instantiated when the onRemember get called, and on the onForgotten, the onDispose function get called, and that's the way we get a kind of callback to clear some resources, and that's the way disposable function works. So let's see some use cases we can have for DisposableEffect in the code. So for the DisposableEffect, I created two examples which are similar, but it showcases how to use the DisposableEffect API. The first one, I created a composable function. I called it listener demo and it passed sensor manager and sensor listener. The example is a bit silly, but I want you to understand the concept of DisposableEffect. In this case, I passed a unit as a key to execute this part only once, and I don't want to register the listener more than once. And the first line, as you see, the sensor listener dot register listener, I'm passing the sensor listener and the type of sensor, which is in this case is a gyroscope. And within the undispose coding block, I am unregistering the listener, which ensure me to unregister the sensor listener when the compose component get destroyed. That's the purpose of DisposableEffect. The other example is quite similar. I'm registering a broadcast receiver, again creating a DisposableEffect coding block and pass the unit as a key because I want to register the broadcast receiver only once. In the first part, I create the broadcast receiver and register it with the context compat function and pass all the parameters needed. And within the onDispose, I again unregister the broadcast receiver. This way ensure me the broadcast receiver get unregistered when the composable component get destroyed and disposed. And the last one is called SideEffect. It's quite straightforward, but a little bit tricky. I'm not sure if it be that much useful than the other ones, but it's an API in case you need to use that. I try to explain what does the implementation look like and what cases we can use. Let's look at the implementation. It's just a normal composable function, except an input function here, and based on any compositions happening in the component, these effect function will be executed. Means a little bit tricky. You have to be careful what you're adding in these functions. So let's look at some example to see how this can help our application. As I said, side effects are less likely to be useful in your code base, but I'm going to show you some example which might be useful in your case. The first one, I created a composable function. I called it logging component, and a side effect within this component. I added a log line here to log the input values. I don't know if it's something useful, but side effect will do such things for us if you want to listen to every recomposition and do something based on that. Like logging could be a case, you can use that. And the other example is analytic. As you see, this composable function called analytics demo, and I'm passing a screen name as an input parameter and a side effect coding block, and within that I track the screen view. But again, this does not really make sense to do this tracking for every recomposition. I'm not really sure how these side effects can be useful, but I just wanted to create some example to show you how they look like in the code. We covered 3 powerful side effect handler in Jetpack Compose: LaunchEffect, DisposableEffect, and SideEffect. And we saw some example and saw the implementation of each and having a good understanding of them. And now we know how to use them in our code base. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Otago channel. And if you have any question about these side effects, just write it in the comment section. We can talk about it. See you till next video.